Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Now, historic films made in the spring of 1948 and just released show Eniwetok preparing for heavily guarded and still largely secret tests of new atomic weapons. The test's purpose is to measure atomic effects on thousands of different materials, 30,000 tons of them, not, as at Bikini, to prove military effectiveness.
San Francisco police say that 9 persons have been arrested in a narcotics raid on the headquarters of the Grateful Dead, a widely popular singing group. 2 members of the group, Rod McKernan and Robert Weir, and their business manager, Danny Rifkin, have been booked on suspicion of possessing narcotics.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, strange lights are causing a viral buzz on YouTube. Could we have caught extraterrestrial activity on a recent newscast? Brandon Arroyo investigates.
As the newscast ended, the controversy began back on September 26th. What is that light shining in the back of the dark night sky?
With coverage reaching all the way back to 1948, for over 70 years, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Now, Fate Magazine Radio is carrying on that tradition of setting the standard in paranormal talk radio as we report and discuss some of the most mysterious and perplexing phenomena imaginable in this strange world of ours. Now, here is your host of Fate Magazine Radio, Kat Hobson.
Good evening. Welcome to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine, and I am so pleased that you are here with me on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I am Kat Hobson, your host. Before we get started with the show, I would like to send my condolences to the family and friends of Scott Martis. He is the person who taught me about water cryptids, marine cryptids. He is the person who shared an awful lot of his research with me about Champ, the Lake Champlain monster. And he was actually scheduled to be my guest again here in November because he had just gotten back from an expedition to Vermont and had a great deal of information to share. And that was the first date that I had open here on Fate. I am just devastated, as are all of us, and I just hate it, because you never know, time is short, and never take it for granted. I don't think that I do, but I don't think any of us really think that we do. So, never let a day go by. Just saying. So, now that now that I have offered those condolences, especially to his wife, I am ready to learn from my guest. Mark Fiorentino has been with me before. It's been almost a year. Actually, it's probably been a year. And I was fascinated by his work. I still am. I mean, I spent forever researching some of the things that he has covered in his book, which, by the way, is called Master of the Universe, and you should get it because it's available in Kindle and hard copy at Amazon. And I bet you he can tell you how to get it from him and maybe get a signed copy too. But he has actually been working and proven Einstein's theory of united field theory. Am I right? I think I'm right. And he's also unified. I misspelled that. Oh, that is what it says. And the special theory of super relativity. And there is another that I am missing because I did not put it in the blurb there. But Mark, I am so very glad that you are here because you're going to save me from myself because I think I've gone cross-eyed on some of the names. But the work that you have done is so intense and so fascinating, and you have been a fan of Einstein since you were 4. Was it only because you have the same birthday?
Actually, it was the age of 10.
10. I thought 4.
Oh, no.
Because I was going to say you were such a precocious child.
I only have one memory from the age of 4, and it's not really too amazing. Just eating a blade of grass on the lawn while my mother's hanging the clothes outside the backyard. It was a beautiful moment that I remember. The wind and breeze were blowing, and it was just, that's the only thing I remember from that age.
That's pretty awesome, though.
Yeah, it's a beautiful memory.
Well, so you became aware and involved in learning about Einstein, and were you into his theories at 10?
I pretty much started right away. As soon as I read in the encyclopedia the case where the nuns had asked us to find a saint born on our birthday and report on that, Einstein, who was the person who I found that was born on my birthday. So I just went to encyclopedia and started reading about him, and I really was amazed and moved by the person. And then from that, I learned about the unified field theory that was also written in the Encyclopedia Britannica. And that impressed me greatly because it made so much sense to me, even at that age. It just says, this is an amazing thing, and I have to learn more about it. And that's how I got into science in general and started studying and listening to everything I could get in field of science, and there were many shows and documentaries along the years that I watched and so forth, but that's how I got into it.
Well, some of those documentaries are still kind of overwhelming for a layperson, but when you start reading about them, it's not nearly as overwhelming. But basically, you actually retired to do this research and to write this book and to further your studies of improving these theories.
Right. I did. I spent from the first day of retirement, which was I think it was January 2nd or 3rd, I retired right at the end of the year. I decided to start writing the book. And so I started from my first day of retirement, and 4 years later it was finally done. But I had many notes from the past and so forth that I relied on. And there's the internet, which is an amazing tool for gathering knowledge, which a lot of people don't realize. They use it for entertainment and other things of that nature. But there's a vast storehouse of knowledge that has been digitized, and I took advantage of that, going back and finding documents in some cases that were over 400 years old in order to gather the information I needed to prove the theory of super relativity.
Well, you published, right? In the book
Yes.
as well, but you published your papers.
Yes, one paper now, it's a strange thing. I did this paper like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years before I wrote the book. It was to establish the bridging mechanism for mass and gravity. It was my first attempt. And the main thing I found out by doing this math in this research paper was a particular velocity I needed to learn or to know and have for this math that I've done now, which basically is the unified field theory math, or the origin of mass. And I was able to obtain in that first paper the knowledge of how fast the quarks move inside of the neutron and the proton. And when I went to do this other work, I said, without this piece of information, I'm going to be stuck. And then I remembered that I found that information. And it's so odd, the synchronicity of the very thing I needed, I already worked on and had scientific proof of. And it's, it's
you love it when a plan comes together, right?
Yeah. How odd that I would work on something like that years in advance of this other theoretical concept, and then have just exactly what I needed for that when I needed it. So it's kind of interesting. So I have that paper, which is uploaded, and this other one, which is going to be reviewed by a physicist and eventually uploaded to ResearchGate, is going to be the one that really is the theory itself, the mathematics that is required from the serious science and the physicists, and to establish the actual working model of our physical reality, how particles create mass. And it's very important for this to be documented, uploaded, and be there for people to review.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, because I have to tell you that when I Googled unified field theory, when we spoke the first time, I was almost overwhelmed. And there's so much information out, as you said, thank heavens for the internet, but there's so much.
Yeah.
Right? And
the hot topic for scientists, physicists, especially.
It is. And right now, it really is, because there are people who are saying that, Einstein got it so wrong, there's no way, this is inaccurate, and, he missed this, he missed that, and I'm sitting there going, oh, well, I don't know. So I was going to ask you, was he wrong about the unified field theory?
No, I got everything that I got from this theory. 90% of it, or over 90%, really comes from him. He was actually very, very right, except for a few things that I point out in my book about special relativity, and it's a long explanation for why he had a different interpretation for his special relativity than what was originally used to develop the math for that theory. But other than that, he really had it right all along. His intuition about what is real, objective reality, and the mechanics, the deep down, rock solid mechanics, he had it right. And it's been pretty much abandoned because of quantum mechanics. And that's why he had a lot of problems with quantum mechanics, where he kind of argued against it. And he, unfortunately, history says he lost that debate, but I read over it carefully, and I think he was right. So the people who are saying that, they're not right, because his theories really haven't been overturned. General relativity keeps passing every test. Special relativity keeps passing every test. So basically, I don't know what they're talking about when they say something was wrong.
Well, me either. But I wanted to go ahead and get that out there, because I was just, I just felt like I didn't want anybody coming up and say, saying, well, this is that and this is the other. And I figured I'd go to the man himself. So thank you.
Okay.
So, you know, it's really interesting to me that you are, and we'll get into specifics as we go along, but you are linking so many things into Master of Reality that it's not only completing his unified field theory, but it also, yeah, you go to how alien technology functions, and you go also to near-death experiences that are linked to the theory of super relativity. And you know, it's there's so much that was involved. Do you think that Einstein was aware of how much was going to be applied, or how much these theories were going to be applied to? How many different topics of fields of study?
I wondered whether he really gave anti-gravity any thought. So far, I haven't really seen much evidence of him talking about anti-gravity. So until I see something in writing somewhere, right, I would say no. But, you know, he was involved with the U.S. Navy and in some way with an experiment, you know, the Philadelphia experiment. And he was trying to do something, a practical application, which is making ships' radar invisible. And what they actually did was make it more than radar invisible. It was actually visibly invisible. And
was he held accountable for that?
I never really heard of anybody being punished. You know, the Navy still denies it, so you can't be held accountable for something nobody in authority denies. And you know how that is. We got a lot of that going around. Always been that way.
It's always contagious too.
Yeah. So, yeah, there were some very unfortunate things that happened in the Philadelphia experiment. If you assume it was true, and I do believe it was true.
I believe it was true too. I've actually spoken to people who lost people there.
Yeah.
So, you know, I did not obviously speak with any of the people in the shipyard where it was taken, because that was totally under wraps. But I have spoken with people who lost family there. Yeah. And, you know, it happened. There's no way that...
That's good information, you know, and somebody needs to keep all that. I try to keep all these things like that when I get that detailed information from witnesses, because that's all we have to really tell what happened and try to make sense of it all. Because when I hear stories like that, I'm trying to fit them into place in the unified field theory kind of perspective. So, you know, I'm analyzing it and saying, does this make sense according to what you know, physical reality, how it works? If not, then you need to bolt that into this theory somehow. And so that's what, you know, one of my main interests is learning about these extreme cases. And I was, you know, when I realized that I had worked and discovered the origin of mass and gravity and inertia, I realized within a few days that, oh, well, if, you know, we learn this, human beings learn this, the unified field theory, this is something that's old story to aliens. And since they have worked on anti-gravity, their unified field theory, or the really complete one, will also speak about anti-gravity. Because once I learned that gravity was simply a contraction of space, then one could think and say, well, what's the opposite of a contraction from space?
There you
An
go.
expansion. And so then I started working on how can I get space to expand using the set of particles that I have to work with, that us humans have to work with, that we know exist for sure, not making up particles, just using the ones we have to create a field that will create an anti-gravity field. And I describe that in great detail in my book. And basically the answer to that is high magnetics. And the reason why high magnetics works...
We have to get a break. And okay. I want this to be... because this fascinates me. I actually was watching a kid's science show about magnetics today. I was like, oh, isn't that timely? So we will be back right after this. Thank y'all so much for listening to Fate Mag Radio here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. And we will be right back. You come back too.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting. The best in paranormal talk radio.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
This is Jason Bland, host of Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup, where we stream live as a webcast every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, with guests who will blow your mind. Live ghost box sessions where you can call into the show to see if the spirits will talk to you, and the world wide web of weird with the latest in paranormal news and evidence. We're bringing the weird every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow and subscribe.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama. Since 1948, Fate Magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour. Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine, which, by the way, you can check out at fatemag.com. There are so many neat things there, and we'll go into a list of them maybe if you want to at the top of the hour. Awesome things. Yeah, uncirculated editions, there's all kinds of things if you need to stock up your archives. But I am here tonight with Mark Fiorentino, and I do struggle a bit with some of his work simply because I grasp it, but he knows it so much better that I find myself, Mark, the last time we talked, I was sitting there going, really? I mean, you know, and I'd want people to know that I have, you know, read your work, and I do enjoy that, and that I know that a lot of people that listened to us last time said, could we please get some better or some more explanations from the guest if when he comes back, because I already knew that I wanted you to come back. So I'm going to let you do some of that, and that way they'll be getting the information straight from you. And if listeners, if you want to get your questions for Mark in, we have a chat room, and you can just simply go to fatemag.com, and right there on the index page you'll see the home section, and you just hit that and go down to Fate Radio. Boom, you're in our Spreaker launch room. So go get it. Or you can just go to Spreaker.com and find Fate Magazine Radio. That works too. So get your questions in there, because I know I have a ton of them, and I'm sure that the people that listened last time are just fascinated. Now, when we were at break, we were talking about all kinds of things, and there are things that I am Brenda says 1 + 1 = 2. That's relative. That is relative. But one thing that I was fascinated by was the breakthrough discovery that you had that properly explains star formation with the neutronium cores. Because when I started researching neutronium cores, I was like, I'm glad I'm going to be able to ask Mark this. So, where does this happen? How does this happen? And neutronium, is that a proven element? It's not, is it?
It's not really an element. I don't think it's It's just pure, highly packed neutrons. And I really got into the whole thing about neutronium through a course of thought that was started by Einstein, really. He said, I wanted to know how God created this world. I am not interested in that or that phenomena in the spectrum or this or that element. I want to know his thoughts. The rest are details. Well, I thought, I should go to the creator, because that's what he's saying to do, to ask him. If you want to know how something works, you go to the person that created that something.
Yes.
So I put into the theory, and this is a very important thing, it's an intelligent design theory, and it's going to go down in history as being that, and it's very important to be that, because you don't want to leave the creator out of the story of the creation. So getting into the neutron has something that's very odd. It has some very odd behaviors that have mystified physicists from the beginning that they discovered it. And one of these things is that the neutron, if you isolate it, keep it away from other neutrons and other protons, out of the element, just by itself in space, it decays into a proton and an electron.
Right.
And okay, well, what's that?
It separates into both there?
Yeah, it decays, breaks apart, and an electron comes out of the neutron, and it turns into a proton. And since I'm assuming intelligent design, then the question comes up, very logical question, why did God do that? God doesn't do things that don't make sense. There is a reason for that. So I examined the circumstances of this case and realized, the neutron somehow is out in the middle of outer space in some point in time, and it turns into something very useful, hydrogen. A proton and an electron is hydrogen. And who needs hydrogen? The universe. It's the basic building block of stars. And as I found out later, even the planets.
Yes.
And so at some point, and the only point that I assumed that it could be that made sense and when we needed it the most is at the beginning of the universe, the Big Bang. So now I have a reason for why when neutrons are isolated in great quantities, they would be at the Big Bang if the thing that blew up was made of neutronium. And so I started skating backwards and looking at that and say, well, how would So black holes are made of neutronium. And so I started reading about, when stars die, what is left over? A neutron star. Supernovas blow up. What's left? A neutron star. If the star is too big and it blows up, there's a black hole underneath it. See how I just said that? In other words, the stars were created. They were formed by neutronium material, which makes sense because there's another mystery that physicists didn't really ever explain properly, which is star formation. Because if you float hydrogen out in outer space, I want to add one more thing. After the Big Bang, when there's loads of neutronium spheres that are coming out of this Big Bang, that neutron gas will become hydrogen in about 15 minutes. Perfect. Oh. That makes so much sense because now the universe can start building 15 minutes after it's born. And how that's done is, well, it's not just neutron plasma that's coming out of this massive black hole, which is made of solid neutronium, was made of solid neutronium. It's coming out of in all different size spheres, which neutrons, another neat trick that they can do, they're so important to this universe, is that they can be packed really close together. You can't do that with a proton because its repulsive force, its electromagnetic repulsive force, is many orders of magnitude stronger than the gravity needed to bring it together. So hydrogen gas clouds just can't come together on their own, and physicists know that. But yet their explanation is, well, somehow the gas in hydrogen clouds condenses and forms a star. What I'm saying is, from the very beginning, there was a gravitational force that gathered the gas together, overcoming the repulsive force of the protons with intense gravitational pull. And they're spinning, so as we see with the sun, which is rotating, and I'm sure all the other stars are as well, it gathers this hydrogen gas, forms an atmosphere around the neutronium core, and this causes the fusion process to kick in because the gravity is so great, the pressure becomes so strong, it actually starts forcing the hydrogen atoms to fuse into helium. Everything now makes sense. Everything is now explainable. And this is a big deal. This is a big patch into the Big Bang theory. Now, it makes it all make sense because now we have a way to sensibly form stars from neutronium cores, which were given birth at the beginning of the Big Bang. So, and it all comes from an intelligent design because all of that needs to work just the way it does. Right. And it was done by the designer in the first place. It's a perfect design. It makes the universe, it breathes life into the universe. And
I have a question.
Sure.
And it's not probably that relevant, but it is to me. And I do know that Einstein believed in God. I know that you do, because intelligent design has to have a creator. And when all of this starts happening, one of the biggest questions, and I know that somebody is going to ask it, I'm going to beat them to it.
What made the Big Bang?
Yes. What exploded to create the universe? Is there any way to know that other than actually, I'm sure Einstein does. He probably asked as soon as he got there. But
yeah, that's right. You can know all once you get to the other side.
That's right. And you can't until you do, really, for
your consciousness connects back into the globe, to this universal consciousness, which is God. And then any question asked is instantly answered in a way, not with words, but with pure infusion of knowledge. So to answer your question, because I asked that question, hey, well, how did this why did it blow up? There had to be a reason. You could say, well, the finger of God went down on it, and maybe in a way that's...
But went down on what?
On the gigantic cosmic egg that was the the black hole that blew up.
There you go.
That's a romantic way to say it. I know I worked out the details of how exactly what caused it, and it's in my book, and I explain it as what happens is it just so happens that it takes all the mass, or most of the mass, I would say 99.999 or whatever percent of the universe has to be collected together to create a pressure strong enough in the black hole. See, the black hole you can look at like it's the immovable object versus the irresistible force. Mm-hmm. And the irresistible force is what creates the black hole. So the mass inside of all the neutrons is being created by the trefoil pattern that it's being executed by all the quarks. So you've got all these neutrons packed tighter and tighter together. As the black hole grows, the neutrons become packed even tighter. And since they're neutrons, they're neutral. They don't really have a repulsive force like the proton does. So they're not pushing back. They're just, okay, I'll get a little closer. Okay, I get a little closer. But at a point where they start to overrun each other, they're in such close proximity that the quarks inside of the neutrons start banging up against the other quarks. When that happens, a tremendous, god-awful heat intensity builds up in the core. I mean, trillions upon trillions of degrees of heat, and photons and electrons are I want to say electrons, not absolutely sure, but I'm guessing electrons as well. But most definitely photons are blowing out of there in response to this compaction and interaction of the quarks crashing into each other when they're compressed to the point where the neutrons are, almost in the same space. This disrupts the immovable object because the irresistible force, the motion of these rapidly moving quarks inside of the cores of these neutrons is breaking down. So the gravity starts to loosen because the interference with their pattern of motion, which creates the mass, which I talk about in the book. That's the unified field theory. That's how it was solved. And when that force is interfered with, and they're no longer being bonded together tightly, then it becomes possible. There's a pressure building up, heat, intense pressure building up from the core. And when that happens, it's like what I call an avalanche effect. And once that avalanche starts from the core out, it blows. So then there's this big giant blast from the inside out, and it sort of vaporizes as it goes along the neutronium material until it breaks the surface, and boom, there's the next birth of the universe. So it happens naturally, repetitively, all over again. All of that mass comes out in neutronium spheres and in huge amounts of neutronium gas, plasma, which converts within 15 minutes to hydrogen. The neutronium spheres, the biggest ones, gather all the littler ones around, and galaxies are formed. And then these galaxies go out, and the smaller neutronium spheres are gathering gas to start making stars. And guess what? Even the planets are formed this way, which means there's a neutronium core inside of the Earth, a highly spinning neutronium core, which was probably what gathered enough gas to create like they call it a brown star, or it's just a very small star that burns brightly, initially, but cools and is stable enough, a crust forms. And, what evidence do I have that this happens? Well, in order for this to happen, what happens is that the hydrogen turns to helium, then the helium turns to carbon and silicon and neon and all the other elements. And sure enough, the Earth has all the elements in the periodic table. How did they get here? They just didn't fall from the sky. I think they were made right here. And that's part of what's needed in order to form life. You have to have all these elements, so you can get all this chemistry going so that then life can eventually form here. So it's another, explainable, perfect process that provides everything needed to form life. This whole design was built to support life. And so I'm saying that all the planets were formed by rapidly spinning neutronium cores as well. And I have my concerns in that if the crust isn't big enough, thick enough, then that planet will be unstable. And if you look at Earth's crust, it's got a lot of cracks in it. And the heat, it's not cooling down. The core is remaining hot, which indicates that the fusion process is still going on. And when I looked into that, I said, okay, all right, there's a fusion process in the middle of Earth, then there should be neutrinos coming from the center of the Earth. So I began searching, the internet for, I'm hoping that a scientist says, hey, I wonder if there's neutrinos coming from the center of the Earth. And sure enough, I found a scientist in Japan who turned a neutrino detector toward the center of the Earth. And guess what? There's neutrinos coming out of the center of the Earth. So there's some verification. Now, you can get that as well from fission as well, but it's unlikely that fission is lasted this long, 4.5 billion years. It should have depleted all of the heavier elements. And how did they get there in the first place?
That's a valid question.
Yeah. So
I mean, everything through this is a valid question. Lori in chat was like, I was never very good at theories. This is over my head. And I was like, well, it took me weeks to grasp it. And if I don't pay attention, I would have to start all over again. Because a lot of it is still so controversial. And but there's so much logic to it. I don't know how anyone could study this and understand it without belief in intelligent design. Because the possibilities of just random things appearing from nowhere and just happen to show up is almost ludicrous.
Right.
So when however people related to this in early biblical days, it said, he spoke it, there it was. It's like, well, if he spoke it, and so God time is millennia to create these neutronium stars, but he did create fusion, which made all of this work. So you kind of have to come, and I'm not trying to be facetious or anything, it's just it doesn't make any sense without intelligent design.
Right. It's much easier to make sense, and it helps with asking the right questions, like I did with concerning neutrons. Hey, why does this neutron decay by itself?
Right.
In 15 minutes. A proton, on the other hand, the entire life of the universe, it doesn't decay. Why? Because it needs to not decay. We need to have the hydrogen available, stable out there. It can't be decaying into something else we can't use. So that makes sense as well. Yet on the other hand, the other very critical particle, the neutron, decays in 15 minutes if it's left alone. Otherwise, it lasts as long as the proton. When it's together with other neutrons or inside of elements, that has protons and neutrons, it stays stable. Just what's necessary to make this system work. And it makes sense when you have a designer that does that, because just to say this all randomly happened and makes life and work so well is very hard to believe. It's very hard to come to that. Well, how does randomness know? How does it have the intelligence to make everything work in the universe that we can live in?
It almost is like we're living in a very complicated, very vast Truman Show.
Yeah, it is. You could think of it as like that.
But it's fascinating because, one of the listeners commented that God has a lot of patience because, I would have already slept just like a mosquito. I'm like, well, I could see that.
Well,
but we came along too. So, it's, there's so much to this philosophically as well as mathematically, and they all tie together so tightly that, oh my gosh, we have to go to break, Mark.
It happens.
We're late. This happened when we were talking before because I am always so fascinated by what you do. We'll be right back after this, and y'all come back too.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio. I'm so glad you're here. And if your mind's not blown yet, just hang on a while. It'll get there. We are having the best time. My guest tonight is Mark Fiorentino. And the very first time I interviewed you, Mark, I was scratching my head for days. And here we are, and I've got all of my listeners doing that too. But it's a fascinating topic, but it is very complex. And I just think that there's just so much involved, and to be relatively, play on words, that was unintentional, but it's relatively straightforward until you start trying to break it down, and then it's stuff that just makes your head spin and you need a drink. So fortunately, I have my English breakfast tea sitting here with me. But, it is just fascinating to me, and obviously to you, because, when I love the part of discovering the signature of God, with the mass generating geometry that's annotated here in your Amazon bio, because when I was reading that, I was just kind of like, oh, I did not expect Einstein to really be into God. But the signature of God, tell people what that is, because I know you were talking about you wanted to understand his reasoning, but the signature of God, is that different?
Well, Einstein was looking for, as best I could determine, he was looking for some dynamical type of geometry to explain mass. You see, even with general relativity, now what he did with that was accurately determine the contraction of space. Right. Although many people don't like that word contraction being put in there, and space as if it were a real thing, because right now in physics, they're all over the place about what space is. Some of them know what it is or think they know. Others don't. Others say it's nothing. It's a vacuum. But it's the only thing there is. Right. In this reality, the ether or space is the only thing that exists. Everything is made from that. All particles and energy and mass are consubstantial with the ether, which means they're made of the same thing as the ether. They're just configurations, or these configurations are fields, as physicists would put it. Right. So the signature of God, I went on the hunt for that, again, based on Einstein's quote there, which got me into the signature of God, wanting to read the mind of God, as I've said before, which is no disrespect there, because you really can't. God just has to simply tell you. So I thought, well, where am I going to find, I need to have somebody that's talked to God. And who's done that? Well, people have had near-death experiences. Yes. So I thought to myself, all right, I know that my guardian angels and so forth are passing information to me. So maybe I came up with this thought, or maybe they're helping me or whatever. But let's go with it and say, okay, so if he's going to talk to an NDE person, he's going to tell them, he's going to give them the message for us to find. So I decided, okay, let's give this a shot. I'll give it a week or two, and I'll start reading through NDEs and see if I can find a person died, spoke to God, and they were shown a geometry. And I knew this geometry was going to be composed of something with 3 segments in it. I knew that because I know inside of the neutron and the proton, there are 3 quarks. So this signature, this dynamical geometry is going to be concerned with the quarks. So I'm reasoning all this out and saying, okay, look for somebody that sees triangles or something, I don't know. And God's saying, basically, I am the creator of this thing. And I found them. And within a week, I found a lady called Claire Dennis, who died in a hot air balloon race. They were flying over the Alps, of all things. Oh, wow. And they went up too high. She lost oxygen. She died. They immediately did an emergency descent, brought her back to life. And when she came out of it, she, had all this vision, and she's trying to tell her husband what she saw. So I went out and got our book, and I read it very carefully and closely. And God shows her this dynamical thing called a trefoil knot, and a huge size. And all these different geometric shapes are being spawned by it. And there's a sphere in the center and everything. And he's saying, I am the source of the sun. I am the energy that forms mass. So now I'm getting very excited, because my theory says the energy of the quarks rapidly moving in an accelerated fashion forms the mass field, or gravity. Physicists don't like it when I say mass field, but that's what it is. So I says, this is it. This is this is what you're looking for. This lady has seen the explanation. He's given her the explanation. She's carrying it back to Earth for us to use. So I contact her, and we become engaged. They're very nice people. She has a whole team of people that work with her on the pattern, they call it. Well, I call the pattern the signature. And because basically this is how God created mass and matter. Without that, we have no universe. So what I thought when I was looking for the signature, I says, well, God's the creator. Maybe since he's the creator like us, we create art, we create music, we always sign our work. Where would he sign his work? I says, inside of the atom. It's everywhere and in everything, but it's impossible to see. And I went and I sought out the signature. I found it with this lady. We worked together for a year or so, but the person that she works with, one of them is a very famous mathematician, but he doesn't really believe in God.
Right.
So she's been influenced by that, and now she's not sure if there's a God, and I think that's very unusual for an NDE person. So we had a parting of we had a parting of ways, because it says clearly, I'm a theist, which I believe in God as the creator of the universe, and he intervenes in it in sustaining a personal relationship to his creatures. So he's constantly co-creating with us now. And that's the difference between I and Einstein. Einstein just simply believed that God created the universe, and he wasn't really involved with the creatures at all and whatever. So that's the difference between I and Einstein. So I'm a theist. And the signature, we've had many conversations over there, and then I finally left, and I said, well, we have a fundamental disagreement. I believe in your NDE, and you're not sure that you believe in it. So,
which is a bit of a quandary, right?
And I says, well, I got the information I needed. So then with that physical information, then I started working on looking for the math that could be used to mechanically model that dynamical geometry, which was what Einstein was working on. He didn't know about the quarks. He was born too early. If he were born 50 years later, he'd have worked this out, and you'd be talking to him right now, probably. But it all links together, and it all comes from an intelligent design theory, and that this is not just random stuff that's happening. So the signature of God is how matter or energy particles create mass, which is matter, and then this is how the universe is formed. And that's how it all worked out. That's how it all came together. And it's just a series of thoughts linking together a pattern that all now makes sense. And with this information, that's how I got to the signature of God, which I really believe in the end, religion will eventually subsume science. They'll become one, because the source of science is a spiritual source. And there's so many people, you guys need to hear this, NDE people who affirm what I've just said. And I can, there's one on my website, Father Rick Wendell had a near-death experience, and God tells him, along with others, all of this three-dimensional world is within God. There is nothing outside of God. Everything within this physical universe has to correspond to laws, and God set those laws. They are immutable as God is immutable. None of this, what we see and experience, is an accident. It is intentioned by God. And you'll notice in my book, I keep saying this was done through the power of intention.
Yes.
So it's all coming together. It's all making sense, and we need to join science with religion, because they're one. They're one and the same. There should be no argument. Einstein once said that science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind. And that's a very important thing. That's deep, deep stuff. He hit it right on that nail, right on the head. And that's part of what my mission is, to bring these two together again.
Well, you're on a good start. I am very impressed. So, when we talk about these things, it's very interesting that as we have evolved, we have tried to remove the actual creator of the universe from the science of the universe. And when I started studying noetics, I was very surprised by what I found as far as the belief system that took us there. And one of the things that I actually was concerned about was I felt like I would be disproving abilities that I have, as opposed to reinforcing that they exist, and can they be replicated outside of in different scenarios. So it's been such a learning curve for me, because when I started this, I was just like, oh. And a friend actually said, do you know anything about noetics at all? And I said, I know a lot more than I used to. So, but fortunately, I'm a quick study. I did a lot of work. And all of this stuff kind of ties in with that too. And it amazes me that people turn their back on that. We have a comment in chat that we're going to get to when we come back from our news break. I can't believe it's already at the top of the hour. And everyone, we're going to step away for this break. And thanks to NPR for making the podcast news segment available. And we will be right back. And if you have more questions, put them out there, because this is fascinating. And I know who is in our chat, and I know there are questions. So formulate them, pop them in there, and we'll get to them. Mark is very good at that. So we'll see you on the flip side.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Alabama. Workplace fashions have changed over the years, but what matters stays the same: your employees. We've been the healthcare partner Alabamians have counted on for decades. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Alabama. We cover what matters.
Live from NPR News, I'm Janine Herbst. Florida's healthcare system is feeling the strain of the state's latest COVID-19 surge. More than 10,000 people are currently hospitalized, and that's more than the peak number of patients the state saw a year ago. Stephanie Colombini with member station WUSF reports some experts expect the situation will get worse.
Florida Hospital Association President Mary Mayhew says some hospitals are pausing elective surgeries and taking other steps to free up resources so they can handle the spike. Mayhew says 95% of COVID patients are unvaccinated, so she's urging everyone get their shots. But Mayhew says that won't solve the problem overnight.
The problem right now is it takes several weeks for you to be fully protected. So unfortunately, we are going to continue to see an escalation in the number of those hospitalized for COVID.
Mayhew says wearing masks in public could also help prevent hospital overload. She says her heart breaks for health workers once again having to manage a COVID surge. For NPR News, I'm Stephanie Colombini in Tampa.
Hundreds of demonstrators in Berlin violated a ban on mass gatherings today, taking to the streets to protest pandemic restrictions. NPR's Rob Schmitz reports it led to arrests and clashes with police.
Berlin authorities banned several protests scheduled for this weekend, which were expected to draw tens of thousands of people. But protesters defied the ban, clashing with police in several areas of the city. Berlin's police department deployed 2,000 officers and said that protesters harassed and attacked them.
Rob Schmitz reporting. Telecommunications company Zoom will pay $85 million to settle a lawsuit claiming it violated users' privacy rights. NPR's Catherine Whalen has more.
Meetings, marriages, and even presidential campaigns unfolded over Zoom during the pandemic. But a class action lawsuit says the company failed to safeguard user privacy. The lawsuit points to issues involving sharing data with companies like Facebook, hosts able to use third-party apps without attendees being aware, and hackers interrupting meetings with inappropriate content, a practice now known as Zoom bombing. With this settlement, Zoom has agreed to pay subscribers $85 million and up its security protocols in exchange for admitting no wrongdoing. Users could get 15% back on their subscription or $25, whichever is higher according to settlement documents. The settlement still needs to be approved by a judge. For NPR News, I'm Catherine Whalen.
Zoom is among NPR's financial supporters. As of today, the federal government has run out of the legal authority to borrow money. The debt ceiling that was suspended because of the pandemic expired last night. Now Congress will have to renew it, or the Treasury Department will have to find extraordinary measures to finance the government and avert a default. You're listening to NPR News. Gymnast Simone Biles says she will not compete in tomorrow's floor final at the Tokyo Olympics. The four-time gold medalist hasn't said whether she will compete in the last event, the balance beam final, on Tuesday. An American shot putter today became the first Tokyo Olympic athlete to defy rules against protesting on the medal podium. NPR's Layla Fadel reports Raven Saunders donned a silver medal around her neck and then raised her arms over her head in the shape of an X.
Later, Saunders explained that the X represented the intersection of where all people who are oppressed meet. Saunders is an out-and-proud Black woman and a fierce advocate for social justice on behalf of the communities she represents. She's captured the world's attention with her purple and green hair, her alter ego, the Hulk, and her larger-than-life personality. Protesting on the podium comes with the threat of sanctions by Olympic organizers. But there's growing opposition to the ban. Saunders later tweeted, "Let them try and take this medal." Layla Fadel, NPR News, Tokyo.
A 2,000-year-old ship loaded with wine has been discovered off the coast of Sicily. The ancient Roman ship was carrying a cargo load of amphorae, or clay containers, filled with wine when it sank in the year of 2 BCE. The vessel was discovered during an underwater reconnaissance expedition by a high-tech oceanography ship. Experts say the discovery will help shed light on the maritime routes used in antiquity and reveal the secrets behind the wine trade that boomed during that era. I'm Janine Herbst, and you're listening to NPR News.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour. Welcome back to the second hour of Fate Magazine Radio here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. We are out of Birmingham, Alabama. I am Kat Hobson, your host, and before I get Mark back, I just wanted to mention I had questions about Fate Mag, and I love it. So just so you know, the website is fatemag.com. If your subscription has lapsed, if you need to do a renewal, that's the place to go. If you want to buy archived copies, there are uncirculated issues, and Phyllis is absolutely brilliant at finding these. She knows, I would say she knows almost every story that's been in them. It's just that vast of a knowledge base. I had a guest who thought that she hadn't been published, and she was not sure why, so I mentioned something about it just in random conversation with Phyllis a couple of weeks later, and she said, "We did publish that story," and she went and found it, and she sent Cheryl 2 copies so that she would have one for herself and one to share at cons and whatnot. So she knows everything. There are also trading cards. They're brand new are t-shirts, and I'm going to tell you, I have mine, and it is one of the most comfortable shirts I've ever worn. So, and if you see me at cons coming up, you'll probably see it. And it's a logo shirt. Everybody knows Fate. I can't tell you how many times people stop me. It's just fantastic. It's so much fun. But anyway, now you know. We are, and Brenda said, how much is a subscription? And I'm going to tell you that I am not sure, but fakemag.com is the place to find out. Great books. And it's funny because when I started with Fate 3 years ago, I was booking people left and right because it's free reign, right? It's not just paranormal. It's all of it's paranormal. That's not quite a good, accurate statement. It's awesome. Because I was booking people who had been writing for Fate forever. I did not know David Weatherly very well. Turns out he's a massive contributor. I knew that Rosemary was, because she was our editor as well. Sure miss her. But it's just amazing. It's a great publication. Go get it. Guys, it's just great. The best, though, is when my friend Tim said, that was standard bathroom reading in our house. I was like, okay, I'm not sure if that's too much information or not, but thank you. So there's that. Go check it out, fatemag.com. And Mark, I am so really pleased that you are here. This has been an hour that has blown so many people's minds.
Oh.
And, you know, we were talking when we were at break. I love that. One of these days people are going to start publishing, you know, stuff that gets said on breaks, but it's not going to be done by me. Mm-hmm. And because I like people talking to me on break. But it's just, yeah, we have not given out your website, and there are so many answers there. Would you go ahead, if you would like, and let people know where to find you?
Sure. I'm at www.super-relativity.com. And if you have questions, you can send them to me there's a comments or a subscription area where you put your email and stuff, and you could put a comment. Well, that's going to go to me, and I'll you got your email, and I'm going to mail you back the answer to your question. I'm happy to answer questions about anything we talked about tonight, or anything in general that you have that has concerns with unified field theory, how the universe works, that kind of stuff. Open to any questions that you have, so feel free to come on down there and send me a comment.
Well, and there are questions that you've answered there too.
Yes, I have a blog where I've answered questions, some relating to physics and science, and others relating to NDE sorts of things, and various things. We're talking about reality, so that's all a part of reality, not just the physical realm, but the spiritual realm. That's the bigger picture. And so I'm open to understanding that, because the two realms are related. The spiritual realm, in my opinion, is the master realm. It's the higher level. It's the thing that created this realm, and the being that created this realm comes from the spiritual realm. So if you want more information on that, I suggest coming to my site and going over the blog. And I'm trying to add things to it all the time, but I'm pretty busy. And I mainly answer questions, and sometimes when I answer those questions, I'll just put them in the blog after that. I says, a lot of people would like to know that, so then I add it to the blog as an entry.
Well, I will vouch for any question that comes your way, you're going to have a good answer for, because you take your time, you research, and 90% of the time you're already going to have it. So yeah. I am wanting to share this with you because April in chat says that she just saw a video from an apologeticist. Is that different from an apologist? Say God is outside of time, space, and matter. He believed all three had to be created at the same time. So there's that. What's your take?
Yeah, God is, and the afterlife is basically outside of time. Time, as you be told by many, many NDEs, is it doesn't really exist there. And they have access to the past, the present, and the future, just by thought. They can go back in time and look at the dinosaurs or past lives, or go into the future, which is a little trickier because the future is really something that has a lot to do with probabilities, and where we are now and what's going to happen is determined by the actions and thoughts that we're doing right now. So that's why it's critical to do your best, to do good now at this time, at this moment in history, so that the future becomes better and better. The path goes toward the light, the positive. So to get back to what you're saying, yes, God is out of time, but here, and I talk about time in the book, it emerges into this existence because there's something that is required to make time intervals observable, and that is space. If space is not a real thing, it would take no time to traverse. So you have a formula: distance equals rate times time. So if you want to solve for how long does it take for us to go, let's say, at the speed of light at 1 meter. Well, if space were equal to nothing, like many people say, there was nothing there, it was a complete empty void. If I held that meter stick out into space and I shot a light beam by it, it would take 0 time. If you do the math, that's what happens if there's nothing there. But there is something there, and it takes light 8.5 minutes to get from the sun to the earth. If there was nothing between the sun and the earth, it would be light would get here instantly, and we never see that happen. It always takes time. That means there's something physical out there. You have to have that in order for the light to take some time to traverse that distance. And so there's evidence that space is a something. And once you have that, then you have real distance, and then you have a rate. So when you have some specific rate and you're moving, at some specific rate over a specific different distance, it will calculate out to a certain time. So now we have time in the physical realm because we have a real physical space that allows time to emerge here in a way that physical finite beings can absorb it, understand it, see events happening in a nice sequence that makes sense to our minds. It's all possible because we have a real distance. And when you start messing with the distance, the metric of space, that's when you start affecting the rate of time flow. And but in reality, time really isn't real. It's not a real thing. But we can measure it and experience it because there's a physical space that exists. Without it, we wouldn't have any time. And I guess that's maybe why on the other side, they're capable of going infinitely fast speeds by the speed of thought. They want to go to the edge of the universe. They think it and they're there. I've read that in NDEs. And when you're out of time, speed becomes infinite. That's another thing that Hendrik Antoon Lorentz said. We have time here, and you can tell about our motion through space by how fast time flows. And when you're in a gravitational field, it goes slightly slower because the space around the gravitational field is contracted toward the source. It's thicker. There's more of it. It takes more time to traverse that distance because there's more stuff in between points A and B that you're traveling across. And that's what we see when we shoot a light beam into a gravitational field. It looks like it slows down. Not really. It didn't really slow down. There's more stuff for it to go across there, so it takes slightly longer time. All simple math. This is all simple mechanics. It's just your frame of mind. You got to get around to the existence, and that's the problem with science and physicists right now. They're still battling over whether there's a real space or not. And once you get over that and you realize there is an ether, a space, a medium, what do you call it? The Einstein's explanation for it, space-time medium. It's all the same thing. There's a real something out there, and that something was there from the beginning. And without it, we wouldn't have all that we have here right now. Thank God for the space, the ether, and everything emerges from it. So, yeah, it's a good question.
And I think that the ether is sometimes misconstrued. There's so many different explanations for it. And I just find that interesting too, because nothing is just plain old monotonous with this. There is so much. And this is interesting because if you throw this into the mix, this is going to be fun. What do you think about reincarnation, Mark?
Definitely a believer in reincarnation. almost to the point beyond belief. It's just knowledge. I accept it fully and completely that we are reincarnated. It comes up in near-death experiences all the time. It comes up in mediums who are talking to the other side. The people there are talking about their past lives. There's past life regression. There's so much evidence for the existence of reincarnation that I don't question it, and it makes sense to me. It makes sense that we come back many times over in many different forms and so forth to experience new things and to gather experience and or more lessons to be learned. And we have an eternity to do so if we like. And then at some point, if we don't want to go that route anymore, you don't reincarnate anymore. And I'm sure there's a lot of people on the other side that simply said, okay, I'm beyond that, and I'm going to do other things now or whatever. But I'm a definite believer in reincarnation.
Well, that leads to what other things would they be doing?
On the other side, yeah, that's a question I bounce around. I ask it a lot. I wonder what their average day is like there, even though there is no time, which is hard for me to grasp in this reality, since that's all we really know. And but you get there and you have all the time. A moment is a year, and a year is a moment, and it's weird to think about. But I've heard there are classes, and you can take classes with Socrates and Plato and Da Vinci or whoever, you have whatever interests you have and so forth. There's great libraries there with massive amounts of information, everything that's happened everywhere in this universe and all other universities.
Libraries of Alexandria.
They dwarf that library.
Yeah, but what a place to start.
Yeah, that would be neat to have been able to walk through there. I'm sure they had a lot of interesting, great stuff there. But there's lots of things to do on the other side, and some people just play on the beach and enjoy the perfection of the afterlife and the beauty that's there. So there's all kinds of things going on there, and I only know just a little bit. I'm totally reliant on the people who have been there and brought back information.
I was very blessed to be able to interview Raymond Moody when I very first started doing Paranormal Experienced. And he is, A, he's a hoot and a half, but B, he is the creator of the term, near-death experience, right, and did the initial research and such. Have you had a chance to have any kind of contact with him relevant to this?
No, I haven't. I read that first book. I loved it.
Yes, I did
certainly
too.
Got me into becoming aware of near-death experiencers. And I thought it was a great work, a monumental work that's very important. It's really, I think, changed our culture and our society in a positive direction. And I would love to get the inside scoop on some of the things he's found out over the years and discovered through talking with people with NDEs.
I will give you his contact information after the show.
Yeah, that would be fun. Thanks. I'd love that.
But I do need to let people know that you are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama, and we are not at this moment taking a break because there's too much info. But I would just love to be able to experience where April says the Bible says a day is 1,000 years and 1,000 years is a day. I just think that would be, I guess that would be heaven, wouldn't it? So, interesting concept, kind of, that you can do all those things, because I would definitely like to sit at the foot of Plato and just listen for a while. That would be fun.
Yeah.
But I am absolutely, I told you before we ever started, can you talk about your the slip waves?
Sure.
because I am really interested in that. And there's so much here. I mean, we could go for days, and I wouldn't mind a bit. You'd probably get tired. But
Love it
but
too.
what is a slip wave for people who are not yet familiar with your work?
Well, it was this discovery I made because I wondered how particles move. In science, let me get this thing out of the way. In science, there's a thing called kinematics. It's the branch of mechanics concerned with the motion of objects without reference to the forces which cause the motion. So, like in special relativity, that's kinematics. We don't talk about how the photon, what causes the photon to move. We accept it has a momentum, and we just do calculations based on that number.
That's not complete.
Yeah, that's right. But when you press, and I've looked at, went to Quora and looked at, answers. When people ask that, hey, how does a photon, why does it move at this speed? They get double talk.
Right.
And from guys that are really good at answering physicist questions, they say, well, it's your units, and you talk. We use the unit 1 for, speed and the unit 1 for distance. And, and they never answer the question, why does the speed of light have a very specific rate of motion? And how does it accomplish that? When if we wanted to move at the speed of light, it would take all of the energy in the universe to get our rocket up to that speed. And that's no easy trick. So how does a particle on its own, without any help from rockets or anything else, constantly, perpetually move at the speed of light? And so I decided I got to determine, part of the unified field theory basically is determining how the particles do this magic. And I'm not the only one that's thought about that. And I kept looking for a reference from Einstein, and I finally found it. And where did I find it? In the Unified Field Theory of Gravitation and Electricity, July 25th, 1925. The very last sentence. I call it a clue left behind by Einstein. He makes this sentence: nevertheless, I'm still far away from claiming the physical validity of the equations I derived. The reason for that is that I did not succeed in deriving equations of motion for particles yet. So he was working on it too. He knew the importance. Other physicists don't even attempt to figure that out. And so the slip wave is the answer, and that will be the method, since I have now described the mechanical model for the motion of particles. The equations can be derived, in my opinion, and with the help of a physicist, I think I could do that fairly easily. But so the slip wave is how particles move, and so let's go over what a particle is, and we're going to use the electron because it's the most basic particle. It's a charge. A charge is an electrostatic field. An electrostatic field is a physical twist of space. The ether itself is twisted wherever an electron exists. So as the electron moves, what moves is the configuration of that space, which is a twist. So as the particle moves, the electrostatic field, which is a twist of space, causes a secondary force to emerge, the magnetic field. As the charge moves, it twists the space. The space rotates around the charge because the charge is twisted. And so in response to that, as the charge moves, the space rotates around the charge as it's moving. That field is the magnetic field. So that's 2/3 of the explanation for the unified field theory, which is electromagnetism and gravity emerge as aspects of a single fundamental field. The single fundamental field is the ether. So now that we have that in mind, magnetism is a rotation of space. The electrostatic field is a twist of space. So all that we have left is gravity, which I discovered is a contraction of space. So, how does the particle move? Within the particle, since it's a twist, if you get a piece of silly putty and you put it down on a comic book strip and you pick it up and look at it, twist it. Look what happens to the picture when you twist it. It stretches. And that's the key. That's the big discovery, because space is a quasi-elastic solid. Silly putty isn't elastic, right? When you twist it, it stretches. When you cause it to rotate, it stretches. And when you stretch space, you get a pressure gradient. So at the beginning of the particle, you twist a little bit. There's a little bit of I got to get this right, a little bit of a drop of pressure and a decrease in density. And the more you twist it, the more the pressure drops, the more the density drops. By the time you got to the end of the particle, which is a complete, in the case of the electron, a complete 180 degrees of rotation, you get a lot of less density and pressure. So within there is a pressure gradient within the electron. Same thing for the photon, a little more complicated, won't get into that. But for the sake of the electron, you got this pressure gradient, and pressure causes motion. And I'll give you examples. If you don't believe me, think about the weather. High and low pressure system cause winds. Winds are motion. Pressure in a water hose, the water pressure causes the water to move. Pressure on the wings of airplanes causes lift. Yes. High pressure on the bottom, low pressure on the top causes the plane to lift and go up. Pressure inside of combustion engines causes the pistons to move. Pressure causes motion. So I discovered, when looking at a bubble rising from the bottom of the ocean, I observed higher pressure gradient in the medium, and it was pushing the bubble up from the bottom to the surface. Pressure causes motion. I determined that it must be pressure within the particles, within them, not outside of them, but within them, that causes them to move. And once you establish, so it's their structure that establishes motion. And it's simple, straightforward mechanics. And once you have this in mind, in grip, it becomes so simple and clear that this is the mechanism that causes motion in particles. How this was not discovered by now is astounding to me, but that's it. That's the slip wave. It's a pressure gradient inside of particles. And what we do when we want to make a spaceship, we use that same model, and you use magnetic fields to create the pressure gradient across the length of the spaceship, and it gives it propulsion and anti-gravity by doing that. It's the same method. That is the slip wave.
That is astounding, because that is exactly... Remember me telling you that I was watching a kid's science show called Science Max today? Well, he was building magnets, and it was so interesting and so much fun. And he actually had a physicist from the Ontario Science Centre, which is my favorite science center, with him. And they were making bigger magnets, and it was so simple. But the rotation of the copper around the batteries was what was creating the magnetic field. And as you're sitting there saying this, I know it's simplified, but it was just so aha moment. There is so much. Every time we've only interviewed twice, but both times there's been so many feeds, because I don't believe in coincidence either. But and I didn't know we were going to be talking about rotation, so that's pretty amazing, right?
Yeah.
I love that. When the universe steps in to help.
A synchronicity. Yeah.
Always.
And that's no accident.
Never. No. Synchronicity is just part of being guided.
Yeah. It's beautiful, and they're working with us all the time. All we have to do is ask.
Well, and truly, I was concerned about this part of this interview because I was not having a fantastic grasp on this particular aspect. And when I was watching that show today, I was like, I will be darned. So then we come to this part of the thing. This is just proof, right, that the universe loves us and wants us to understand it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. If you get anything out of this show tonight, get that. That's great.
Yes. But, I'll trade you that for a site for my book.
All right.
But, I am just so very glad that you're here, because I am going to really enjoy going back and listening to this over and over, because there's so much information. And there's other things that I wanted to talk with you about. We have a question in chat relevant to parallel universes.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what she wanted me to ask you, but she wanted me to just bring them up with you, I guess. I'm trying to find... Okay. Brenda, what did you want to know about parallel universes? Did you want to know if they exist? Which is, I think it would be almost impossible for them not to.
Yeah.
And, but is there anything other than people's experience of time slips, which, interestingly enough, I'm going to be interviewing Von Brashler in November. And he just wrote a book on time slips, so you might like hearing that one too. Or time shifts. But is that kind of an explanation, or oh, she said yes, that is what she wanted to know about. Do we just kind of stumble into stargates, as it were, because we were going to talk about those too?
Right.
Is that where you enter a parallel universe, or do you believe that we can do that? Do you think they're out there?
Yes, definitely. The Creator not only created this universe, but an infinite number. When I use the word infinite, my head starts to spin. But it's an infinite, eternal being. So there's no reason for there ever to be a limit to the end of space, and no reason to limit the amount of. If there's one universe, well, really, there could be two. Why? If there's one, why not two?
And
if
why
there's
not
25,000? Yeah, that's
How
right.
can we ever think that we're going to find them all?
There's no reason for there to be a limit.
Right.
So I would say, based on the many NDEs that have talked about it, yeah, there's parallel dimensions and universes, and I do have a chapter where I talk about the dimensions and universes in general. And yeah, I absolutely am sure that there's many more universes where the laws and rules of physics might be different, and their experiences will be different because of that. There's higher dimensions, I'm sure. I don't know how many lower dimensions there are, but there's probably lower dimensions as well. And yes, the answer is yes. There are an infinite number of universes and dimensions, and that's part of the giant playground that our Creator has put together for experiencing. And we people, we're just like single threads in a tapestry. That is God. Each lifetime is a thread that goes into that tapestry, and we're all a part of that being. We're all together. There's no us versus them. That's only in our minds. We're all one, and as soon as you get back to the other side, you discover that there is no real separation. That's a thing that we kind of do here when we become material, and we form identities based on our physical appearances and and attributes and such. But we're really all one, and if we could get back to thinking that way, that would be better for all humanity. But definitely multiple dimensions, multiple universes.
You're absolutely right. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could get back to that? We're supposed to live that way.
That's exactly right. That's what Jesus taught, basically the golden rule. If we could just get that and start living that, all our problems basically go away.
Absolutely, they do. But, it's, she says, well, I want to go back to the one I was born in. If you can find it, I'm sure they'll take you.
Yeah, you can review it. You get to the other side.
Yes.
No problem.
And something that I love, and I do want to ask about this, because Stargate technology that can be used to travel to different time and space dimensions, it's not really that new, is it? I mean, because we've had the, and I'm sorry, I do believe in the 20+1 or 10+1, whatever period is involved in the Space Force, and I've sat down and talked with somebody who said they were part of that, and I don't know, I'm normally really great at reading people's energy and their intent, and I didn't get anything that was funny baloney off this guy, and usually I will if somebody's trying to just blow smoke up your skirt, but it was interesting because Stargate technology, would that be how they would manage that?
Yeah. The beauty of the Stargate is that you can not only jump between dimensions, and that includes time dimensions, but spatial dimensions and universal different universes. Now, how this technology works, the mathematics behind it, all I could come up with so far is that basically you have a system that you set up that you need a metamaterial. What's a metamaterial? It's a kind of material that adjusts the permittivity and permeability of space in such a way it reduces the permittivity and permeability to the point where they're almost at zero or at zero. When you do this, according to Maxwell's equation, c, the speed of light, equals 1 over the square root of permittivity times permeability. If you lower those two numbers, which are aspects of space, physical space, another evidence that there is a real space. If space was made of nothing, it would not have the properties of permittivity and permeability. So what we need to do in order to build a Stargate, you've got to build the framework so that you have this, what I believe they call there's a fractal lens, which is a metamaterial that you line the Stargate with this, and then you force, let's say, photons through this. Well, they will accelerate once they enter this material to what they are claiming, and these are claims that you could read about on ResearchGate, that when they have achieved zero permittivity and permeability within this material, they're claiming that the speed of light is infinitely fast. Not my words, their words. But that makes sense. If they have in fact done that, then that equation, which is several hundred years old, has never been disproven, backs up what they're saying. The math backs up that statement. So that means we can make something that can accelerate light within that material to enormous speeds. When that light emerges from the material, it's like an electromagnetic shock wave that encounters the space at a highly compressed rate of motion. It has to slow down to the speed of light again, but the frequency is ultra high in the many, many, many terahertz and beyond. And this causes the space to be disrupted in a way that allows us to tune, like a radio, into different, you open a portal, basically. And, just like on the show, it may look something like what you see on the TV show. I haven't seen it myself, so I don't know. I just can use my imagination and take a guess, an educated guess, that you'll see the other side, the other dimension that's in a parallel kind of a universe or a parallel dimension, and you just step through it. It's just that simple. Once you establish this connection, which is you're basically making space vibrate at a higher frequency, and then you tune to this other dimension or this other reality, and you just step through, and then you're there. And as long as that stargate is open and on, you can go back and forth. Of course, if they turn it off, you're stuck on the other side.
Well, that might not be so bad sometimes. But we do have to take a quick break, and we will be right back. Y'all come back too, because we are rocking this out. This is awesome.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back for the final segment of Fate Mag Radio. I am so glad you're here, and I hope that you have enjoyed my guest, Mark Fiorentino, as much as I have. The book is Master of the Universe, available on Amazon.com, Kindle, or hard copy. I would say hard copy because you're going to want to make notes as you go through it. But, and I know Kindle does that, but it's so much more fun with a highlighter. So,
I have a little small correction for you.
Tell me.
It's Master of Reality.
Master, what did I say?
Master of the Universe, which is nice.
Oh, that would be
Either
Einstein.
one.
But yeah.
Universe, reality, they're the same thing.
Well, but I'm sorry. That's
right.
so funny. But I guess you're just going to have to take over for Einstein with that. So, but I have had the best time with you. What?
Enjoyed it too.
I wanted to go back to the metamaterials.
Okay.
Because what would be that kind of a material? Are you familiar with a metamaterial that would allow this shift in the permeability and permittivity? Is there something you know about?
Yeah, it's in. I found them on researchgate.net. Yeah, it's not a .com, it's a .net.
Yes.
And that's where I found it, but there's also things, what is that term? I used another term a little while ago. Oh, fractal lens. You got to use certain keywords in order to get this stuff to come up. Let's see if there's anything.
Is that a fractal lens like used to be in lighthouses?
No, that's a Fresnel lens.
Fresnel. Thank you. I was confused
different.
on that.
Yeah, that's concentric rings kind of that focus the beam. A fractal lens, I think, is how I got into it. But you look up that in ResearchGate or metamaterials mainly is probably the best way to look it up. And I do metamaterials. If I learn how to spell it right. And you're gonna, smart materials, nanocomposites, metamaterials, also called left-handed materials. I don't know why they call it left-handed material.
Because it knows what the right hand doesn't.
But you start reading about metamaterials, and you'll get into it. It's an engineered material.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the way they shape the geometry of, and how they do with semiconductors, like those kind of things. They build these structures that cause some sort of a resonant cavity in them or whatever. I don't know all the physics of it. I haven't really studied that much. All I wanted to know, does this exist and can it do this?
Right.
And that's why I got into it, because I knew I was going to need that because I'm imagining building a Stargate. And like I say at the beginning of that chapter, the first thing I said, I'm writing that chapter with not knowing how to design it yet. I says, all I know is this. Something is going to have to go faster than the speed of light. If we're going to be able to tune space to higher frequencies, that's a requirement. So then I start to look for metamaterials or things that all the details of this discovery goes in my next book, because it's got to do with supernatural things that were occurring, and I need to just spell that all out in that book. But because I didn't really want to write a chapter on Stargates.
Well, but it would be so much fun. I'm looking forward to that book already.
Why I didn't want to, because I was afraid they were going to do something that I'm very much against, travel back in time.
Well, that's what I was actually concerned about with everybody else was concerned that they were going to create black matter, which was going to eat the Earth, and we would have nothing with the Hadron Collider. But I was more concerned about time travel. A couple of friends of mine together wrote a book about that, and George Lopez and Andrea Perrin, and the book was actually, that a researcher of Jack the Ripper went back to that period of time in London to research and see if he could find out who Jack the Ripper was. It's a wonderful book. It was the concept is brilliant.
Yeah.
But it was that was actually, even before that was what I was concerned about, because if you rupture the time, the space-time continuum, then that leads to really bad things in Stephen King's books. So, I didn't want to have that happen. But if you're a non-science person, that really can be something that can take you aback, I think.
Yeah, I find it very disturbing, because you start different timelines.
Yes.
Because there's always possibilities in the future of what can happen, and our decisions and actions determine eventually what happens. And if you go back, then you're going to have to, there's a chance that you could really mess something up and create a whole new reality back to your present. And I find that deeply disturbing. And, I'm a guy that says a card laid is a card played. Don't change it. And don't mess with it, because odds are we're not going to be very good at it.
And we're probably not going to like it, because we're not very good at it.
Bad things are going, can happen. Who knows? This is playing with physical reality, and it's not something that I think that we should play with. On the other hand, I have a very deep, romantic kind of reminiscent kind of feeling about the past, especially the 1890s, 1900s, in that period. And there's a part of me that would love to go back and live in that time. But with that said, I think overall it's a bad idea to try to fix things that don't need fixing. And so I'm concerned. That's why I'm concerned about stargates in general. Yeah, going other places using this technology is a great way to get around the galaxy, and then some. Basically, this all started with the Philadelphia experiment, and then the Montauk Project, which kind of continued it.
Gosh, yes.
So they're into it. They're into it deep, I imagine. And I think the initial technologies were magnetic resonant, but they were weak in power compared to the ones that use light and lasers, and that newer technology with the fractal lenses is much more powerful. Extends the range of where we could travel to in time and in physical space. So yeah, it would be fascinating to actually see one and learn about the technology of how you tune to a particular dimension or different region of space and all that stuff. I would be fascinated by the technology behind that and automating that. I love automation. That's what I did when I was IBM and ImageSoft and places like that. I like to automate things, make it so it all kind of automatically does all this magic.
I love that too.
Yeah.
I don't know how to make the magic happen, but I appreciate people who do and let me play with all the cool stuff.
Yeah.
So, well, I can't believe that we are so close to over for this particular episode, because there are going to be more.
Yes.
And when you get that book out, I want that interview.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
Because that may even be paranormal experience size. We'll have to spread that out between the two. But they have a bit of a different listener base, and it's a lot of fun to be able to share people on both. But tell people again, Mark, where to find you, and try to get that book title right, okay? So,
Master of Reality. And it's at www.super-relativity.com, and there's links to right on the front page, right up front, to go get the book on Amazon, or you could order from me. While it's still available, I'll send you a signed copy, United States only, for that. So that's where I'm at.
That's awesome. And, you actually are so good at getting your information across. Everyone has enjoyed you very much. And Brenda says the fact that someone that smart believes in some of the same things I do comforts me. And also that this was a great show.
Great.
So she's looking forward to you coming back already.
Sure. Okay.
But, I am appreciative, and I always close the show in a particular way, so I hope that I am not going to offend anyone with this, but I do it anyway. The time that we're living in, speaking of space-time, is kind of difficult for people. There's a lot of angst, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of sadness, there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of fear. And fear of the unknown, fear of the known. My husband was supposed to be in New Orleans this weekend. There was a mass shooting on Bourbon Street today. So I'm ever so grateful that he is in my home with me. There's also a mass shooting in Brooklyn. And the first thing that I was hearing was, we've got to do something about, this gun violence. And we do. We need to start changing hearts and attitudes and bringing people to value life. And we can do that. We are spiritual beings. We were created as such. And we have, all of us, the capacity to manifest the change that we want to see in the world. We also can be the change ourselves. Smile. If you're wearing a mask, smile. I know that my friend felt that she was being deprived of an opportunity to reach out and help people because they couldn't see her smile. You smile with your eyes. You smile with your soul. You can do that. So do that. And, don't let the fear win. Just don't. Because, again, we can make this world what we want. We do it all the time. Somebody told me once that I'm a great manifester. I am not a great manifester. I absolutely believe, well, maybe I am, but I absolutely believe that you get back what you put out. So I try to put out good. And so many of y'all do that too. There are people who are brilliant at this stuff. So be the change you want to see. And if you have a question about how to do that, my friend Corey Smith wrote a song about it. And it's called Be the Change. You can find it on YouTube. And he wrote it for an organization in Africa. And it's a wonderful song. But you can be the change you want to see. Mark, thanks again. Everyone listening, thank you so much for supporting us. Fate Magazine Radio is historic. Fate Magazine is absolutely historic. It's thebomb.com. It's been in publication since 1948, and it is still rocking and rolling. Great editor, great contributors. Enjoy that. Go check it out. Thank you again. I hope that you have a wonderful night. See you next time. Same cat time, same cat channel. Good night.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.